Hey there, my name is Megan and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my favorite series finales. Last week I did a video about my least favorite series finales, so I thought it would be a lot of fun to flip the coin and do my favorite series finales. But before we go ahead and get on into the list, if you are not already subscribed to my channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button as well as the little bell icon so you can be notified every time I post new bookish content. I post new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and sometimes other days throughout the week. Also, don't forget to check down in the description box for links to all of my social media, my Buddy Read Discord, and my Patreon, where you can be entered into winning book giveaways. So I have 7 books total. I have 3 adult and then I have 4 young adults, which is less than like my least favorite finales list, which is kind of disappointing, but I'm also in the middle of a bunch of series. So I'll go ahead and put timestamps down below if you're just interested in skipping to one or the other. The first book I'm going to be talking about is The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 3 in his Mistborn trilogy, which I feel like most people are familiar with at this point, but I felt like this was such an awesome finale, and the way that Brandon Sanderson built on and expanded his world throughout this trilogy and then at the end just kind of tied everything together was so epically done. We also got to experience some awesome character arcs from Elend and Ven, Spook, and especially Cezad. This book, as compared to the other books, is filled with so much action. There are so many things at stake, and we get to see these characters as they have changed over time confront these challenges in such an epic manner. And I love this series also because the ending was not what I expected. The reader is led to believe one thing throughout books 1 and 2, and as the events and explanations and lore slowly unfolds in book 3, we realize that Brandon Sanderson is going in a completely different direction. And I love when authors are able to thwart the reader and throw in those twists and turns because it's just a sign of a good plot. The next book is Vengeful by V.E. Schwab. This is book 2 in her Villain series, and I think there's a rumor going around that there's going to be a 3rd book, and I'm just going to treat this as it is a finale because the 3rd book is not out yet. And to be honest, the main conflict was resolved in this book, so if she chooses to make a 3rd book, I imagine it'll be a completely different plot line. If you don't know what the Villain series is about, it's about these 2 men who during college figured out a way to get extraordinary abilities by having near-death experiences, and they were best friends and kind of like co-workers, and something happened. They fell out of favor with one another, and one of them is trying to kill the other. So we do get to experience that conflict in book 1, and then it kind of is resolved in book 1, but then it trickles into book 2 because there was kind of like an open-ended thing going on. But the reason that I love this book so much is that it really centers around Victor, and Victor is such a morally gray character. Like sometimes he's likable, sometimes he's redeemable, and then sometimes he does these horrible things. Like he's ruthless, he's merciless, he's a killer, he does whatever he can to get the job done regardless if it's moral or not. And I just loved the roller coaster ride of being involved in this character's life because I love him, but then sometimes he does things and I can't stand him. We also get to experience kind of more growth of our side characters who also have extraordinary abilities, and I really loved that storyline as well. But I love how V.E. Schwab gave the reader the impression that this story could go on and that Victor could have other experiences, and I'm really excited to see if she continues on in this world, even though this particular plot line was wrapped up. Vengeful was one of my favorite books in 2020, and if you have not read the Villain series, I highly recommend it. The next book is The Autumn Republic by Brian McKellen. This is book 3 in his original Powder Mage trilogy. And the reason that I included this book is because this is a flintlock fantasy series. There is a lot of war going on. There are use of guns and gunpowder and explosives and things like that. And when you look at it from that point of view, that is the world that the author was trying to create and develop this plot within, then this book definitely would be a great finale because it is all basically battles and war. This book is almost entirely following an army, and we get to follow our different military personnel as they are dealing with this war and what it means for their homeland, and just the involvement of the gods in this book and how they relate to the military part of the story was just really cool. But Brian McKellen wanted to deliver a Flintlock fantasy, and I feel like this book specifically definitely encompasses that because it's mostly following fighting and wars, and I just completely ate it up. Now I'm going to go on to my young adult finales, and the first one is going to be Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. This is book 2 in her Six of Crows duology. This is another one where there's rumors going around that there might be another book in the series, but each book is very much a standalone. So I like this book better than the first book because I felt like the first book delved way too much into the backstories of the characters, and I understand that we have to get to know the characters, but I felt like it really pulled me out of the main plot line. And in this book, we know the characters. They're established, so we don't have that constant flashback and that constant disruption of the plot. So I was way more engaged in this book. And I also found that the heist in this book, like the main problem the characters had to do, was way more interesting, way more believable than the first one. And I just felt like the mechanics of getting the heist done and the mystery and all of that was so much more clever. And I also love that Leigh Bardugo made it look like things were going to work out for our characters in this specific heist, and then they would encounter all of these problems and would have to work through those problems. There was definitely a lot of plot twists with regards to that I really appreciated, and it just kind of kept me on my toes. So this was definitely a step up in my personal opinion to Six of Crows, and I really enjoyed it. Next, we have Winter by Melissa Meyer. This is book 4 in her Lunar Chronicles quartet, and this is a young adult sci-fi series, but they're fairy tale retellings that take place in this like world where this plague has taken over and people are living on the moon, and there's this evil queen that lives on the moon and wants to take over Earth, and just all of these shenanigans going on. First and foremost, it's such a unique concept to mix sci-fi and like fairy tale retellings, but this one specifically, if you can't tell by the cover, is a retelling of Snow White. And the reason that I really enjoyed this finale so much is that each installment of this series introduces a new character and a new fairy tale, and the way that Melissa Meyer was able to integrate all of those stories because they are so newly introduced into the entirety of the plot line was extremely well done. It never felt disjointed. It was very smooth, very seamless. And the way that she was so easily and quickly able to develop relationships between all of these characters was extremely well done and enjoyable to read about. And then in book 4, all of it comes together. All of those loose ties are tied up and nothing is left for wanting. And she just did an awesome job with bringing it all together. And I absolutely thought it was a great ending to a series. The next book is The Sweet Far Thing by Libba Bray. This is book 3 in the Gemma Doyle series, and the reason that I like this finale so much is that we actually are more in the magical world of this book than we are in the regular world. This is kind of like a portal fantasy, and I loved the expansion of the world in this book as compared to the previous 2 books. It's also the, I think, longest book of the series, but it read extremely fast. So the pacing was just very well done in my personal opinion for such a big book. And another reason that I liked this trilogy is that we actually got more dynamics between the main group of characters, which is 4 girls. We get to learn more about them. There are some reveals that happen with the characters that I was not expecting. And we also get more of the love interest, Kartik, who in the first 2 books really didn't have much of a part. He was there, he was important, but compared to Gemma and the girls, his part was not that big. And even though he plays such a small part at the end of this book, Libba Bray kind of makes him the crux of the entire plot, and the way that she did that, I was not expecting it. It blew my mind, and it really made me emotional because I had come to love this character and his relationship with Gemma. And this ending is so bittersweet, and you know, bittersweet endings can be hit or miss with me. I loved all the characters. I loved the way that she created an ending for each individual character, and just how she wrapped up the conflict was just extremely emotional, and it was such a good ending. Definitely one of my favorites. And then we have This Vicious Cure by Emily Suvada. This is a young adult science fiction series, and it has to do with a world that has experienced this horrible plague. It actually turns people into these zombie-like beings before they are taken by it, and our main character is trying to uncover how her father was involved in the plague and maybe the creation of it, maybe the cure, we don't really know. And the reason that I liked this finale so much is that, and it's going to be really hard to explain without spoilers, but our main character, there's actually way more to her than we first realize in the first book, and then it's kind of expanded on into the second book. And then something happens to her where she is actually trapped and she cannot really navigate her own life, and there are certain like parameters set around her, so she's having to work with what seems like the enemy in order to save the world. And it was such a bizarre concept, and when I first like saw where the author was going, I was like, that's just weird and it's never going to happen, that's not possible. But by the third book, I was so invested in the storyline and just the science fiction aspect of it and what the author created that I was all for it. And it's just the way that our main character kind of had these two identities and had to work to reconcile these identities. It was awesome. And I know that's incredibly ambiguous because you really have to read this book. I don't think that I could explain this series in any shape or form in order to make you understand what it's about, but this is definitely one of the best young adult finales I have read personally, and I feel like most young adult finales kind of dropped the ball, but this one just took it and ran and was awesome. All right, you guys, so that is it for my favorite series finales. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, or what some of your favorite series finales are, and I will see y'all soon in another video. Goodbye.